Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has appointed a delegation to look at US President Donald Trump's proposal to end the war with Russia. Western leaders have said they accept the plan as a basis for further negotiations, but that more work is needed. Trump has pressured Ukraine to accept the agreement by next Thursday. But the US president also appeared to hint there was still room to negotiate when speaking to reporters on Saturday.
President Zelenskyy lays a corn wreath to honour victims of the famine inflicted on Ukraine by Stalin in the 1930s. Millions died of starvation. Ukraine's leader and his wife also took part in a service at the Assumption Cathedral in Kyiv. Zelenskyy is sending a delegation to Switzerland for talks with the US, Germany, Britain and France. The war began with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, following the Kremlin's annexation of Crimea in 2014.
Our representatives know how to defend Ukrainian national interests and what is needed to ensure that Russia does not carry out a third invasion, another blow to Ukraine.
The peace plan put forward by the US and Russia has overshadowed a summit of the G20 countries in South Africa. Ukraine's allies meeting there accept the idea in principle, but say more work is needed.
I want to make it very clear that the war can only end if Ukraine gives its unconditional consent. Wars can't be ended by the major powers acting over the heads of the countries involved. The war can only end with the consent of Ukraine and with our consent, European consent, as it's a war being fought in the continent of Europe.
The 28-point plan has a number of important elements which are essential to a just and lasting peace, and that's what we all want. There is more to do on the plan.
In the meantime, there's no let-up in the conflict. Mourners gather for the funeral of a mother and her young daughter killed in a Russian strike that destroyed their home in Ternopil in western Ukraine. Donald Trump has given Ukraine until next Thursday, the US Thanksgiving Day, to accept his plan to end the war.
And joining us now is Domitilla Sagramoso. She's a senior lecturer in security and development at King's College London. Domitilla, with this meeting in Switzerland on Sunday that was mentioned earlier, there seems to be a glimmer of hope that Ukraine and its allies can change the plan again. Is that justified, you think?
Yes, I think the fact that Trump is saying that, that there is room for negotiations, that this is not the final plan. He seems to have been in his declarations today a bit more flexible than he was yesterday. So I think that maybe because of pressure from European allies, because of pressures inside the United States, it seems that he understands that he cannot sort of force this plan as it is on Ukraine. But of course, a lot will depend on how these next weeks this whole process is managed, and whether there can be some flexibility in terms of pushing back the deadline, negotiating some key points which are essential. There are many elements of this peace proposal which are extremely challenging for Ukraine to accept and also for the Europeans. So we have to see what comes next out of Geneva.
Now, Putin has said he is willing to discuss the plan's details, but if Ukraine rejects it, Russia will push on with its war. Could Ukraine withstand another winter of war?
I think they can. I think on the front lines, the situation is difficult, but it's not a complete collapse of the front. So Ukrainians are sort of holding on. The situation, of course, with the whole energy grid and the electricity is problematic. The Russians have been quite effective at hitting at all the key knots of the system. But I think that the Ukrainians are very resilient and they're not going to give in. I think Russia, was planning to continue fighting, so this wouldn't be a major change. I think the big question is whether the United States is going to keep supporting Ukraine, though it does less than it used to do, and the Europeans are doing a lot more. We still are in a situation where we are, as Europeans and Ukrainians, still dependent on certain elements from the United States, from intelligence, control and communication, long-range, missiles, and support, for example, of air defense systems like the Patriot missiles. So, we cannot completely ignore, the position of the Americans. So I think it will be a very tough moment. We will have to stay, calm and see how things develop.
Domitilla, very briefly, if you can, do you see any points in these 28 points where Russia would make a concession?
Actually, there are hardly any concessions from the Russian side, and it's clear that this was a peace plan that was drafted by the Russians, also by the language, and that maybe, Witkoff, the American envoy, had some input. Probably around the question of assets and, and the benefits that could come out if it is approved for the United States. But I think that, it's clear that it's extremely problematic on the question of territory. Ukrainians would probably find it very hard to hand in territory that the Russians do not occupy yet, also because these areas are extremely significant in terms of being major strongholds that keep the Russians from advancing. So, it's a high risk for Ukrainians. And also, if this is implemented, it's very hard to know the sequence. Here, there is no clear sequence. And, Ukrainians may be asked to pull out, and then Russians might have every excuse that other parts of the deal are not being implemented, and then not really
Domitilla, I'm afraid we have to leave it here. We're running out of time. Thank you very much, Domitilla Sagramoso there.
Thank you.
We can now talk to Rudik. She's the leader of Ukraine's pro-European Holos party and a member of parliament in Kyiv. Kira, do you reject this 28-point plan completely, or are there parts of it that you could accept?
Hello, Gerhard, and thank you so much for having me. There are some parts that are acceptable, and these parts are about returning Ukrainian children and about exchanging the prisoners of war all for all. This is something Ukraine has offered alongside the unconditional ceasefire earlier this year, and it was never accepted by Russia. So there are two main sides what's wrong with this plan. The first is the format, and the second is the essence. As for the format, of course, it was not discussed with Ukraine beforehand and with our European allies, but moreover, Kremlin officially did not confirm that this is what they need and this is what they want, and they said that they will be also looking into this plan to see if they agree with that or not. And the essence obviously contradicts each other in terms of the internal parts of the plan, and I'm sure that everybody understands that this plan really needs lots of work.
Now, talking about the essence of it, giving up land, renouncing NATO membership are just 2 points. Could Ukraine even begin to think about agreeing to that?
It's not in our interest, and I'm sure that the team that is going to Switzerland right now will make it very clear to our partners in the United States. But let me tell you this. It's not the first time when we are faced with the plan that we cannot accept, and then we are able to work it through. The first draft of the rare minerals deal that was presented was not acceptable too, and then Ukrainian team was able to negotiate with President Trump's team to the point where we happily ratified it in Ukrainian parliament with the constitutional majority of the votes. So I really hope that right now Ukraine will push back and will find a way to move forward without losing the US support.
Now, under the plan, Russia would have to pledge not to invade neighboring countries. If Putin agreed to this, can he be trusted?
I think this is the most laughable part of the plan, saying that Russia will agree not to attack other countries. They have already broke all the international laws, committed all kinds of the war crimes, and I'm absolutely sure that nobody in their sane mind would trust Russia or their leadership about their future. What is really worrying there is that the limitations on Ukraine's army, limitations on our forces and missile production is something that shows the intention for Russia to attack again. Because if they are not planning to attack us more and not planning to have any other wars, why would they care of how many military equipment and how many people in the army we have?
Now, you mentioned this, but tomorrow there's a meeting in Geneva between European, American and Ukrainian negotiators to discuss this plan. What do you expect from that?
I think that should be a first step where Ukraine will share its position, because up till this point, our position was not included into this negotiation. And then on this level of advisors, they will start working. Again, this is not a new way of negotiating for us. It has happened before. And I'm sure that the United States understand that Ukraine cannot give up the sovereignty and cannot give up our territorial integrity. And moreover, what we really like to clarify in this plan, what are the security guarantees that are being offered by the United States? It's not very clear in the document. We have already been there with the Budapest Memorandum, where the guarantees were replaced with the word assurances, and it never worked for Ukraine after we given up on our nuclear weapons. So there are many practical pieces of work there that need to be worked through with different delegations. So I really hope that tomorrow will be the first step in this process, and it will allow us to share with President Trump that we are not declining any peace talks or any negotiations, but that we need to stand up for what is best for Ukraine.
Now, very briefly, please. Zelenskyy yesterday said that Ukraine may now face the difficult choice between losing its dignity or losing its most important partner, the US. Do you agree?
At the beginning of 2022, when we didn't know if we have any partners or allies, and Russians were surrounding Kyiv, I'm sure it was much more difficult time. Right now, at least, we are not alone, and we know how to fight back. So yes, the situation is tough, the situation is dire, but I'm sure that we will find a way out of it.
The Ukrainian lawmaker Rudik there joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.